In the year 2147, humanity had reached a point of incredible progress. The world was no longer bound by the limits of Earth. People lived on space stations, mined asteroids, and explored distant moons. But even with all this advancement, there was one thing that kept humanity from feeling truly free. These were beings known only as the Architects, powerful entities, seemed to exist beyond human understanding. The Architects had been part of human history for centuries, though no one really knew where they came from or what they wanted. Some believed they were gods, others thought they were ancient aliens. What everyone agreed on was that these beings had shaped human evolution in ways no one fully understood. They guided civilizations, sparked revolutions, and sometimes caused destruction. Their actions were unpredictable, but their presence loomed large over everything humanity did. On a small, barren moon, orbiting a gas giant far from Earth, a group of scientists worked in secret. This place was hidden from prying eyes, buried deep beneath layers of rock and ice. It was here that Project Eclipse took shape, a bold attempt to create weapons capable of defeating the Architects. For years, whispers of such a project had circulated among researchers, but few dared to believe it could actually succeed. Now, those whispers had become reality. Leading the team were two individuals, Daniel Hayes and Rachel Brooks. Daniel was a man driven by loss. His younger brother had died decades ago during one of the Architects' interventions on Earth. That event had left a scar on Daniel's soul, fueling his determination to fight back against forces he saw as cruel and indifferent. He believed that if humanity could stand up to the researchers hoped, the weapon would be more than just a tool, it would be a symbol of defiance. Proof that humans could take control of their own destiny. Rachel, however, approached the project with caution. She shared Daniel's desire to protect humanity, but worried about the consequences of challenging something so vast and mysterious. Her mind often wandered to questions she couldn't answer. What if the Architects weren't enemies? Their actions, however harsh, were meant to guide humanity toward survival. These doubts weighed heavily on her, but she pushed them aside, focusing instead on the task at hand. The facility buzzed with activity as the team prepared to test the first prototype weapon. It was a sleek blade forged from quantum matter, shimmering with an otherworldly glow. The material itself defied conventional physics, existing somewhere between solid and energy. When held, it hummed faintly as though alive. The blade wasn't just designed to cut through physical barriers, it was meant to disrupt the very fabric of reality, targeting the essence of the Architects themselves. As the day of activation arrived, tension filled the air. Everyone gathered around the testing chamber, watching as Daniel carefully placed the blade into its holder. Rachel stood nearby, her arms crossed, her expression unreadable. Behind her, Alex Carter, a young engineer with sharp eyes and a quiet confidence, adjusted the controls on the neural interface pod. This device would allow whoever wielded the blade to experience its full potential without risking harm to themselves. So they hoped. "Ready?" Daniel asked, glancing at Rachel. She nodded, though her hesitation was clear. "Let's do this." With a flick of a switch, the blade came to life. Its glow intensified, casting eerie shadows across the room. The facility's AI system began, analyzing data, searching for any signs of instability. Everything appeared normal at first. Then, something strange happened. The AI detected fluctuations in spacetime, ripples that shouldn't have been possible. Warning messages flashed on the screens, but before anyone could react, the blade emitted a low, resonant hum that vibrated through the floor. "What's going on?" Alex asked, leaning closer to the monitors. "I don't know," Rachel replied, frowning. It's interacting with something outside our sensors." Daniel ignored the warnings, his focus fixed on the blade. "It's working," he said, his voice tinged with awe. "This is, I think, the power we need." Rachel wasn't convinced. Something about the situation felt wrong. The blade wasn't behaving like a typical weapon. It wasn't just cutting through simulated targets in the tests, it was reaching out, probing, almost as if it had a mind of its own. She turned to Alex, who was typing furiously at the console. "Can you shut it down?" she asked, Alex hesitated. I'm trying, but the system won't respond. It's like the blade is overriding our commands. Before anyone could act, the lights in the facility flickered, plunging the room into semi-darkness. The hum grew louder, resonating in everyone's chests. Then, suddenly, the blade went silent. The glow dimmed, and the tension eased momentarily. Well, Daniel said, breaking the silence. That was unexpected. Rachel shot him a glare. Unexpected? That was dangerous. We have no idea what just happened. It worked, Daniel insisted. That's all that matters. But Rachel wasn't satisfied. She walked over to the blade, examining it closely. As she reached out to touch it, a jolt of energy surged through her fingertips. Images flooded her mind, flashes of ancient cities crumbling, stars exploding, and faces screaming in terror. She stumbled back, clutching her head. Rachel. Alex rushed to her side, steadying her. Are you okay? She nodded slowly, still shaken. I saw something. I don't know what it was, but it wasn't random. It felt intentional. Daniel frowned. What are you talking about? The blade, Rachel said, her voice trembling. It's not just a weapon. It's connected to something bigger, something we can't see yet. Her words hung in the air, unanswered. No one wanted to admit it, but deep down, they all felt it too. The blade wasn't just a tool, it was a key to unlocking mysteries far beyond their comprehension. And as much as they wanted to believe, they were ready for what lay ahead. A nagging fear lingered in the back of their minds. Unbeknownst to them, the architects were already aware of their efforts. From their vantage point in the cosmos, they observed the tiny speck of life struggling to break free. They knew the blade's creation was inevitable, just as they knew humanity's journey would be fraught with challenges. But they also understood something the scientists didn't. The true enemy wasn't the architect. It was humanity itself. And so, as the team debated their next steps, the stage was set for a confrontation that would change the course of history forever. The second phase of Project Eclipse began with a mix of excitement and unease. The team had spent days analyzing the strange events that occurred during the blade's activation. Rachel's experience with the visions left her shaken, but it also sparked a new line of questioning. What exactly was the blade doing? Was it merely a weapon, or was it something more abridged to forces they didn't fully understand? Despite the lingering doubts, decision was made to move forward with live testing. Alex Carter volunteered to be the first human to wield the Godslayer blade in a controlled environment. At 26 years old, Alex was one of the youngest members of the team, but his sharp mind and steady hands made him an ideal candidate. He wasn't fearless, no one could be when facing something as unknown as this, but he carried a quiet determination that inspired confidence in those around him. Still, as he prepared for the test, Alex couldn't shake the feeling that something about the blade felt alive. The testing chamber was designed to simulate encounters with the architects. Using advanced holographic technology and neural interfaces, the team created lifelike avatars representing different aspects of the being's influence over humanity. These constructs were not physical entities, but manifestations of their power, tall, shimmering figures made of shifting light and shadow. Each avatar embodied a concept: creation, destruction, knowledge, and chaos. Together, they formed a representation of what humanity might face if it ever confronted the architects directly. As Alex stepped into the neural interface pod, Daniel gave him a reassuring nod. "You've got this," he said, though his tone betrayed a hint of nervousness. Rachel stood nearby, watching silently. Her earlier warnings still hung in the air. It's unspoken but understood by everyone present. Once inside the pod, Alex felt the familiar hum of the neural connection syncing with his brain. The room around him dissolved, replaced by an endless expanse of swirling colors and shapes. Before him stood the first avatar, towering figure radiating warmth and light, symbolizing creation. Its voice echoed in Alex's mind, not in words, but in feelings of hope and possibility. "Begin the simulation," came Daniel's voice through the comm system. Alex gripped the hilt of the Godslayer blade, its glow pulsing softly in response to his touch. With a deep breath, he moved forward, raising the weapon. As the blade connected with the avatar, a shockwave rippled outward, disrupting the construct's form. It shattered like glass, dissolving into fragments of light that faded into nothingness. Success. The team cheered over the comes, but Alex barely heard them. Something about the strike felt off. It wasn't just cutting through an illusion, it was unraveling something deeper. Almost as if the blade was severing threads woven into the fabric of reality itself. Encouraged by the initial success, the team moved on to the next phase. The second avatar appeared, a dark, jagged figure embodying destruction. This time, the challenge was greater. The avatar lashed out with bursts of energy, forcing Alex to dodge and weave as he closed the distance. When the blade finally struck, the resulting explosion of energy sent Alex stumbling backward. For a moment, he thought he saw flashes of distant worlds collapsing under fiery skies. The vision vanished as quickly as it came, leaving him disoriented. By the third test, fatigue began to set in. The avatar of knowledge loomed before Alex, its form constantly shifting between geometric patterns and flowing streams of data. Construct didn't attack physically. Instead, it bombarded Alex with overwhelming information images of ancient civilizations, complex equations, and cryptic symbols scrolling faster than his mind could process. Clutching the blade tightly, Alex swung, shattering the avatar into fragments. But as it dissolved, a flood of memories not his own rushed into his consciousness. He saw glimpses of lives lived under the architect's guidance, moments of triumph and despair, unity and conflict. The weight of it all pressed down on him, threatening to overwhelm him. When the final avatar representing chaos emerged, Alex was already struggling. The construct was unpredictable, its movements erratic and impossible to anticipate. Strike from the blade seemed to destabilize the simulation further, until the entire environment began breaking apart. Colors bled together, sounds distorted, and gravity shifted unpredictably. Just as Alex delivered the final blow, the world around him collapsed entirely. Pulling him out of the simulation, back in the real world, Alex gasped for air, clutching his head as the neural interface disconnected. His body trembled, and sweat dripped from his brow. The team rushed to his side, voices overlapping in concern. "Are you okay?" Rachel asked, placing a hand on his shoulder. Alex nodded weakly, though his eyes darted around the room as if searching for something only he could see. I think so," he muttered, "but there's something wrong, something I don't." "Understand what happened?" Daniel demanded, his tone sharp with impatience. "It wasn't just a simulation," Alex replied, his voice hoarse. "It felt real. Too real. Like the blade wasn't just cutting through illusions, it was tearing open pieces of something else." Rachel exchanged a worried glance with another scientist, Emily Dawson, who had been monitoring the data. "We're seeing anomalies here too," Emily said, pointing to the screens. "The blade isn't behaving like a normal weapon. It's interacting with quantum fields we can't even measure accurately." Daniel dismissed the concerns with a wave of his hand. "That's why we built it, to do things beyond our understanding. We're making progress." But Rachel wasn't convinced. She pulled Emily aside while the others helped Alex recover. "What are we missing?" she whispered urgently. "This isn't just about defeating the architects anymore. There's something bigger at play here." Emily hesitated before answering. "I've been running calculations based on the anomalies. If I'm reading this right, the blade isn't just affecting simulated constructs, it's tapping into actual layers of reality, maybe even timelines." Rachel's stomach churned at the implications. "You mean every time Alex used the blade, he might have altered something real?" "I don't know for sure," Emily admitted. "But it's possible, and if that's true, we're playing with forces we can't control." Rachel finished grimly. Meanwhile, Alex sat alone in a corner of the lab, trying to make sense of the visions that lingered in his mind. Fragments of alien landscapes, forgotten histories, and haunting whispers swirled in his thoughts. He couldn't shake the sensation that the blade was showing him truths humanity wasn't ready to face. Worst of all, he began to doubt whether humanity deserved the freedom it sought, or if wielding such power would only lead to ruin. As the day wore on, tensions within the team grew. Some, like Daniel, remained steadfast in their belief that the project was necessary. Others, including Rachel and Emily, voiced growing concerns about the risks involved. Arguments broke out, tempers flared, and trust began to fray. Despite the disagreements, one thing was clear. The Godslayer blade had changed everything. And somewhere, far beyond the reach of human perception, the architects watched and waited. They knew the blade's creation marked a turning point, not just for humanity, but for the cosmos itself. Whether it would bring salvation or destruction remained to be seen. But one truth was undeniable. Humanity's journey toward independence had only just begun, and the cost of that freedom might exceed anything they could imagine. Word of the blade's existence spread faster than anyone expected, despite the secrecy surrounding Project Eclipse. Rumors leaked out whispers of a weapon capable of challenging the architects. At first, the team dismissed these reports as paranoia or exaggeration. But then strange things began happening around the facility. Equipment malfunctioned without explanation. Communication signals were interrupted by bursts of static. And in the quiet moments between tests, some swore they heard faint, otherworldly whispers echoing through the halls. Rachel Brooks noticed it first. Late one night, as she reviewed data from the recent simulations, a chill ran down her spine. The air felt heavier, charged with an energy that made her skin tingle. Now she glanced up from her screen and froze. In the corner of the room, shadows seemed to twist and writhe, forming shapes that shouldn't exist. For a brief moment, she thought she saw a pair of glowing eyes staring back at her. Then, just as suddenly, the sensation vanished. She told herself it was exhaustion playing tricks on her mind. But when others started reporting similar experiences, doubt crept in. Emily Dawson confided in Rachel that she'd seen flickering lights in the corridors, moving in patterns that defied logic. Alex Carter mentioned hearing voices, soft, indistinct murmurs that faded whenever he turned to look. Even Daniel Hayes, who usually dismissed anything unproven as superstition, admitted to feeling uneasy. The final confirmation came when sensors detected an anomaly outside the facility. On the surface of the barren moon, something massive was approaching. It didn't move like a ship or any known spacecraft. Instead, it shimmered and shifted, its form constantly changing as if it existed simultaneously in multiple dimensions. Alarm klaxons blared throughout the base, snapping everyone into action. "This is it," Daniel said, his voice tight with tension but also resolve. "They're here." Panic rippled through the team, but Daniel quickly took charge, rallying them with a mix of determination and authority. He reminded them why they had built the Godslayer blade, not out of fear, but out of hope for humanity's future. "We've trained for this," he declared. "We knew they'd come eventually. Now we show them we're not afraid." Rachel disagreed but kept her thoughts to herself. She believed fear wasn't the problem, hubris was. Humanity had rushed into this confrontation without fully understanding what it meant to challenge beings like the architects. Still, she couldn't deny the importance of standing firm now. If they faltered, all their work would be for nothing. As preparations continued, Rachel stepped forward with a plan. "We need someone steady," she said, looking at Alex. "Someone who's already connected to the blade." Though Alex still bore the mental scars of the simulations, he nodded without hesitation. He understood the stakes, and he knew there was no turning back. Outside, the entity descended, casting an eerie glow across the moon's desolate landscape. Up close, it was even more awe-inspiring and terrifying than anyone had imagined. Its form was impossible to describe, shifting between geometric shapes, flowing streams of light, and vast, incomprehensible structures that seemed to stretch infinitely in every direction. It wasn't just large, it was other. Every instinct screamed at the humans to run, to hide, to submit, yet they stood their ground. Alex stepped onto the observation platform overlooking the moon's surface. Clutching the Godslayer blade, the weapon hummed faintly in his hand, responding to the presence of the architect. Behind him, Rachel monitored readings from inside the facility, relaying instructions through a comms link. Daniel paced anxiously. Torn between pride and dread, the architect spoke not in words, but in sensations so profound they overwhelmed the senses. Awe washed over the team, followed by despair, curiosity, and anger, all swirling together in a maelstrom of emotion. Alex staggered under the weight of it, nearly dropping the blade. But he steadied himself, focusing on the task ahead. "Remember, what you've practiced," Rachel urged through the coms. "Trust the blade. It knows what to do." Taking a deep breath, Alex raised the weapon and stepped closer to the edge of the platform. The architect loomed above him, its gaze piercing deeper than any physical force ever could. Then, with a surge of courage or perhaps desperation, Alex swung the blade. Time seemed to stop. The Godslayer blade sliced cleanly through part of the architect's form, leaving behind trails of collapsing energy fields that shimmered like ripples on water. For a moment, it looked like victory was within reach. But instead of retaliating, the architect simply observed. Its presence filled the air, heavy and unyielding. Yes. It regarded Alex with an expressionless gaze, and then it spoke not in emotions. This time, but in a single, resonant question that echoed in every mind present. "Do you understand what you are destroying?" The words hit like a thunderclap, shaking the very core of everyone's beliefs. Alex dropped to his knees, overwhelmed by the sheer magnitude of the question. Rachel gasped, clutching the console as tears welled up in her eyes. Even Daniel, who had always been certain of their mission, found himself questioning everything. "What does it mean?" Alex whispered, his voice trembling. "What are we doing?" No one answered. The architect lingered for a moment longer, its form flickering faintly before retreating into the void. As it disappeared, the oppressive energy lifted, leaving the team in stunned silence. Inside the facility, arguments erupted almost immediately. Some argued that the blade had proven its worth, that humanity could stand against the architects if it chose to. Others, led by Rachel, insisted that the encounter had revealed how little they truly understood. "It wasn't attacking us," she said, her voice firm despite her exhaustion. "It was asking us to think, to consider what we're fighting for." Daniel refused to listen. "They've controlled us for centuries," he snapped. "Now we have the power to break free. Are you saying we should just roll over and accept their rule?" "I'm saying we don't know enough," Rachel shot back. "If we act without understanding, we might destroy ourselves, or worse." The debate raged on, dividing the team further. Meanwhile, Alex sat alone, staring at the blade in his hands. The visions he'd experienced during the simulations returned clearer now than ever before. He saw civilizations rising and falling under the architect's guidance, moments of beauty and horror intertwined. He realized that humanity's struggle wasn't just about freedom, it was about choice. Choices, he understood, carried consequences far beyond what anyone could predict. Unbeknownst to the team, the architects weren't done observing. They had withdrawn, yes, but not because they feared the blade. They wanted to see how humanity would respond to the question they had posed. Would they continue to fight blindly, driven by fear and ambition? Or would they pause, reflect, and seek understanding? As the days passed, the cracks within the team grew wider. Trust eroded, tempers flared, and the once unified goal of Project Eclipse began to unravel. Yet amid the chaos, a glimmer of hope remained. Perhaps, just perhaps, humanity wasn't ready to wield such power, but maybe it could learn. And somewhere in the vastness of space, the architects waited, watching silently as the fragile species they had nurtured stumbled toward its next great challenge. The tension inside the facility reached a breaking point. The team was divided, their unity shattered by the weight of what had happened during the encounter with the architect. Some believed they should press forward, convinced that humanity's survival depended on defeating these godlike beings. Others argued that continuing down this path would lead to disaster, that they were playing with forces far beyond their understanding. Amid the arguments and accusations, trust dissolved, leaving only fragments of the collaboration that had once driven them. Rachel Brooks found herself caught in the middle. On one side was Daniel Hayes, whose determination bordered on obsession. He refused to entertain any suggestion of retreat or compromise. "We've come too far to back down now," he insisted, during one heated meeting. "We don't finish this, everything we've worked for will be wasted." On the other side were those like Emily Dawson and Alex Carter, who had grown increasingly uneasy. Alex especially struggled with the visions he'd experienced through the blade. They haunted him, replaying in his mind whenever he closed his eyes. Ancient cities rising from dust, civilizations collapsing under the weight of their own hubris. Moments of creation and destruction intertwined. It all felt like a warning. But when he tried to explain this to Daniel, his words fell on deaf ears. "You're letting fear cloud your judgment," Daniel snapped at Alex during one confrontation. "This isn't about you or your nightmares. It's about giving humanity a chance to stand on its own." Alex clenched his fists, frustration boiling over. And what happens if we win? What happens when we take away the very thing that's kept us alive this long? "Do you even know what we're fighting for?" Daniel didn't answer. Instead, he turned away, dismissing Alex's concerns as weakness. Rachel watched the exchange silently, her heart heavy with doubt. She knew Alex was right. This wasn't just about defeating an enemy. It was about understanding the consequences of such an act. But she also understood Daniel's perspective. Fear of the architects had driven humanity for centuries, shaping every decision, every step forward. To let go of that fear meant stepping into the unknown, a leap no one was truly prepared to take. As the debates raged on, cracks began to appear not just within the team, but in the facility itself. Strange occurrences became more frequent. Lights flickered unpredictably. Equipment malfunctioned without explanation. And then, one night, the alarms blared again, not because of an external threat, but because someone had tampered with the systems. Rachel discovered the sabotage while reviewing security footage. A shadowy figure moved through the corridors, late at night, disabling critical systems and erasing logs. At first, suspicion fell on Alex, given his growing unease with the project. But when Rachel confronted him, she saw nothing but honesty in his eyes. "I may not agree with this," he said quietly, "but I wouldn't sabotage it. That's not who I am." Reluctantly, Rachel believed him. Her investigation led her deeper into the facility's archives, where she uncovered something startling. Evidence that the architects had influenced human history far more deeply than anyone suspected. Hidden among encrypted files were records of ancient technologies, architectural designs, and even genetic modifications, all bearing unmistakable signs of extraterrestrial origin. Pieces of humanity's greatest achievements weren't entirely human after all. The discovery shook Rachel to her core. If the architects had guided humanity's development for so long, what did it mean to rebel against them now? Were they oppressors, as Daniel claimed, or caretakers trying to steer a fragile species toward survival? The line between freedom and destruction blurred, leaving her unsure of what to believe. Meanwhile, tensions within the team escalated into outright conflict. During one particularly volatile meeting, voices rose until they drowned out reason. Accusations flew across the room, each word cutting deeper than the last. "You're throwing away everything we've worked for," Daniel shouted at Emily, his face red with anger. "And you're leading us straight into disaster." Emily shot back, her voice trembling with emotion. "We can't keep ignoring the risks." Before the argument could spiral further, the lights went out. Darkness engulfed the room, plunging everyone into silence. For a moment, no one moved. Then, faintly, the hum of the Godslayer blade echoed through the air, drawing everyone's attention. "It's active," Alex whispered, his voice barely audible. "But no one's touching it." Fear rippled through the group as they realized the blade had activated on its own. Its glow illuminated the room, casting eerie shadows on the walls. Rachel approached cautiously, her pulse racing. She drew closer. The blade pulsed brighter, resonating with an energy that seemed almost alive. "What's happening?" Daniel demanded, his earlier bravado replaced by uncertainty. "I don't know," Rachel admitted, "but it's responding to something." The blade's vibrations grew stronger, filling the room with a low, rhythmic thrum. Then, suddenly, it stopped. The glow dimmed, and the facility fell silent once more. In the stillness, Rachel noticed something new, a faint pattern etched into the blade's surface, glowing softly like constellations in the night sky. Without hesitation, she reached out to touch it. Images flooded her mind, clearer and more vivid than ever before. She saw timelines stretching endlessly into the future, branching and intertwining like roots of a tree. Each branch represented a possible outcome of humanity's choices, some flourishing, others collapsing under the weight of their own mistakes. And at the center of it all stood the architects, watching silently as humanity teetered on the edge of chaos and creation. When Rachel pulled her hand away, tears streamed down her face. "It's not just a weapon," she said, her voice shaking. "It's a map, a guide. It's showing us what could happen if we choose to fight or if we choose to understand." Her words hung in the air, unanswered, but undeniable. Slowly, the team began to piece together what she meant. The blade wasn't designed solely to destroy. It was meant to reveal truths hidden beneath layers of fear and misunderstanding. It forced them to confront not just the architects, but themselves. For Alex, the realization brought a strange sense of peace. The visions he'd been haunted by weren't warnings. They were invitations. Invitations to see the bigger picture, to understand the delicate balance between freedom and responsibility. He picked up the blade, feeling its weight settle in. His hands this time, it didn't feel like a burden. It felt like a tool, a means to bridge the gap between humanity and the beings who had shaped its destiny. Daniel, however, remained unconvinced. "Even if it's a guide," he argued, "we can't afford to hesitate. Every second we waste gives them more time to interfere." "But maybe interference isn't the right word," Rachel countered gently. "What if they're protecting us from ourselves?" The debate continued, unresolved but quieter now. The team knew they couldn't stay divided forever. Time was running out, and the architect's patience wouldn't last indefinitely. Yet amid the uncertainty, one thing became clear. The choice ahead wasn't just about winning or losing. It was about deciding what kind of future humanity wanted on, whether it was ready to face the consequences of that choice. As dawn broke over the barren moon outside, the facility remained quiet, its occupants lost in thought. The Godslayer blade rested in its holder, its glow dim but steady, reminder of the power and the responsibility that lay in their hands. Whatever happened next, they would have to face it together. The days that followed were filled with unease. The team knew they couldn't delay their decision any longer. The architects had withdrawn after their first encounter, but everyone felt it was only a matter of time before they returned. The question wasn't whether humanity could fight back. It was whether it should. This uncertainty weighed heavily on the group, driving them to search for answers in every piece of data they had gathered. Rachel Brooks took the lead in trying to understand the patterns etched into the Godslayer blade. She spent hours studying its faintly glowing markings, comparing them to the records she had uncovered about the architect's influence on human history. Slowly, a picture began to emerge. The blade wasn't just a weapon or a map. It was a key to communication. Its quantum properties allowed it to interact with dimensions beyond human perception, potentially creating a bridge between species. "We've been thinking about this all wrong," Rachel said during one meeting. Her voice was calm but firm, cutting through the tension in the room. "This isn't about destroying the architects. It's about understanding them and ourselves." Daniel Hayes frowned, his arms crossed tightly over his chest. "How does that help us? They've controlled us for centuries. Are we supposed to sit back and let them keep doing it?" "No," Rachel replied, meeting his gaze steadily. "But maybe control isn't the right word. What if they've been guiding us not because they want to dominate, but because they're afraid of what we'll do without them?" Alex Carter nodded slowly, his expression thoughtful. "Does that make sense? Think about the visions I've seen. Civilizations that rose and fell. Maybe they're not our enemies. Maybe they're teachers." The idea was unsettling, but it resonated with some members of the team. Emily Dawson spoke up, her tone cautious but hopeful. "If that's true, then maybe we don't need to fight them. Maybe we can talk to them instead." Daniel scoffed, shaking his head. "Talk? After everything they've done, you really think they'll listen?" "They already have," Rachel countered. "Remember the question they asked Alex? Do you understand what you are destroying?" That wasn't an attack. It was an invitation. Her words hung in the air, sparking a mix of doubt and curiosity among the group. For the first time since the project began, the focus shifted from destruction to dialogue. But bridging the gap between humanity and the architects wouldn't be easy. The team needed a plan, one that relied less on force and more on trust. Rachel proposed using the blade as a conduit for communication, instead of wielding it as a weapon. They would attempt to use its quantum properties to establish a direct connection with the architects. It was risky, as no one knew how the beings would respond. But it was also their best chance at finding common ground. Alex volunteered to carry out the plan. Despite the lingering effects of the visions he'd experienced, he understood the risks better than anyone, but he also believed it was the right thing to do. "I've seen what happens when we act without understanding," he said quietly. "If there's even a small chance this will work, I have to try." Preparations began immediately. The team modified the neural interface pod to amplify the blade's quantum signals, hoping to create a stable link. Rachel worked tirelessly alongside Emily, double-checking every calculation and running simulations to ensure the process would be safe, or as safe as possible. Daniel remained skeptical, but stayed involved, driven by a desire to protect humanity, even if he disagreed with the approach. As the day of the attempt approached, nerves ran high. The facility buzzed with quiet activity, everyone focused on their tasks. Outside, the barren moon stretched endlessly, its silence a stark contrast to the tension inside. When everything was ready, Alex stepped into the pod, clutching the Godslayer blade. His hands trembled slightly, but his resolve never wavered. "Are you sure about this?" Rachel asked, placing a hand on his shoulder. Alex nodded. "It's the only way." With a deep breath, he activated the system. The hum of the blade grew louder, its glow intensifying, until it filled the room with light. The neural interface synced with Alex's mind, pulling him into a space that felt both familiar and alien. Around him, shapes and colors swirled, forming pathways that seemed to stretch infinitely in every direction. Then suddenly, a presence emerged, smaller. Humanoid figure cloaked in iridescent light. Unlike the towering avatars they had encountered before, this being radiated calm and curiosity. Didn't speak in words, but projected emotions and images directly into Alex's consciousness. He saw flashes of humanity's past moments of triumph and failure, unity and division. He felt the weight of the architect's decisions, each one made with the hope of steering humanity toward survival. And he understood, finally, why they had intervened so often, not out of malice, but out of fear. Fear that humanity, left unchecked, would destroy itself or worse, destabilize the delicate balance of the cosmos. The being extended a hand, inviting Alex to share his thoughts. Hesitant, but determined, Alex reached out, letting the blade act as a bridge. Images flooded between them, humanity's struggles, its dreams, its flaws. The being absorbed it all, responding with glimpses of its own perspective. It showed Alex the vastness of the universe, the interconnectedness of all life, and the fragility of existence itself. When the connection ended, Alex collapsed, exhausted but alive. The team rushed to his side, voices overlapping in concern. "What happened?" Rachel asked, helping him sit up. Alex took a moment to gather his thoughts before answering. "They're not our enemies," he said softly. "They're scared of us." His words stunned the group into silence. Even Daniel, who had always viewed the architects as oppressors, seemed shaken. "Scared of us?" he repeated, his voice tinged with disbelief. "Why?" "Because we're unpredictable," Alex explained. "We have the potential to create or destroy not just ourselves, but everything around us. They've been trying to guide us to keep us from falling apart. But now," he hesitated, searching for the right words. "Now they're wondering if we're ready to make our own choices." Rachel nodded slowly, piecing together the implications. "So they gave us a choice to continue under their guidance, or step into the unknown." "It's not just about freedom," Emily added. "It's about responsibility. It's about proving we can handle the power they've given us." The realization hit everyone differently. For Daniel, it was a call to action, a reminder that humanity's future depended on its ability to rise above its flaws. For Rachel, it was a sobering acknowledgement of the challenges ahead. And for Alex, It was a chance to embrace the uncertainty, knowing that growth came from taking risks. As the team processed what Alex had shared, they agreed on one thing: humanity couldn't go back to the way things were, whether they chose to coexist with the architects or forge their own path. The decision would define their species for generations to come. The Godslayer blade, once seen as a weapon of defiance, had become something else entirely, a symbol of hope and understanding outside. The moon remained silent, its surface untouched by the drama unfolding beneath it. But somewhere in the vastness of space, the architects waited, observing silently as humanity stood on the brink of a new chapter. Whatever happened next, one thing was certain: the journey would be far from easy, but it was theirs to take. The final decision was made after hours of heated discussion. The team agreed that humanity couldn't afford to ignore the lessons they had learned from their encounter with the architects. Armed with Alex's insights and Rachel's analysis, they crafted a proposal. Instead of using the Godslayer blade as a weapon, they would offer it as a gesture of peace, a tool for communication rather than destruction. It was a risky move, but it was the only way to show the architects that humanity was ready to grow. Even if it stumbled along the way, as preparations began, tensions lingered. Daniel Hayes still struggled with the idea of compromise. He believed humanity should stand on its own, free from any external influence, no matter how well-intentioned. "We can't keep relying on them," he argued during one last meeting. "If we do, we'll never truly be free." Rachel Brooks understood his frustration, but she also saw the bigger picture. "Freedom isn't about cutting ties completely," she said gently. "It's about making choices and learning from the consequences. If we shut them out now, we might lose the chance to understand why they've guided us all this time." Alex Carter added his voice to the conversation, speaking from the perspective of someone who had directly connected with the architects. "They're not perfect," he admitted, "but neither are we. Maybe that's the point, to work together, even when it's hard." In the end, Daniel reluctantly agreed to support the plan. His pride wouldn't let him admit it outright, but deep down he recognized the wisdom in what Rachel and Alex were saying. Humanity's future wasn't just about survival, it was about finding balance between independence and cooperation. The day arrived when humanity would make its choice clear. Outside the facility, the barren moon stretched endlessly, its surface bathed in pale light from the distant gas giant. The team gathered on the observation platform, the Godslayer blade resting securely in Alex's hands. Its glow pulsed softly, as though alive, responding to the anticipation in the air. As they waited, a presence emerged on the horizon, a shimmering form that grew larger with each passing moment. This time, the architects sent an emissary unlike anything they had seen before. It was smaller and more approachable, its form radiating warmth and curiosity rather than inspiring power. When it finally came to a stop above the platform, the team felt a strange sense of calm wash over them. Alex stepped forward, raising the blade high. Its glow intensified, casting a soft light across the scene. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, slowly, the emissary extended a hand door, something resembling a hand toward the blade. Connection formed, linking Alex's mind to the being's consciousness. Through the blade, Alex shared humanity's story. Not just the triumphs, but the failures too. He showed the wars, the conflicts, the moments of greed and cruelty that had scarred human history. But he also revealed the beauty, the art, the science, the acts of kindness and sacrifice that defined humanity at its best. He didn't sugarcoat anything. He simply presented the truth, trusting that honesty was the foundation of understanding. The emissary absorbed it all, projecting emotions that ranged from sorrow to admiration. In return, it shared glimpses of its own perspective, the vastness of the universe, the countless civilizations that had risen and fallen under the architect's guidance, and the delicate balance that held everything together. It showed Alex the risks humanity posed, not because it was evil, but because it was unpredictable. Unchecked ambition could lead to chaos, destabilizing entire systems of existence. When the exchange ended, Alex lowered the blade, breathing heavily as the connection faded. The emissary lingered for a moment longer, then turned and began to retreat into the void. As it disappeared, a single message echoed in everyone's minds, not in words, but in feelings of hope, challenge, and possibility. "They've given us a choice," Alex said, breaking the silence. "To continue under their guidance or step into the unknown." "What happens if we choose the unknown?" Emily Dawson asked, her voice trembling slightly. "We take responsibility," Rachel replied, her tone steady. "For better or worse. We become the architects of our own destiny." Daniel nodded slowly, his earlier defiance replaced by quiet determination. "Then let's prove we're ready." Over the following weeks, the team dismantled parts of Project Eclipse, focusing, instead, on building tools for communication and collaboration. The Godslayer blade remained intact, but its purpose shifted. It became a symbol of humanity's willingness to listen, to learn, and to adapt. Fragments of the architect's wisdom were encoded into its quantum lattice, serving as a reminder of the lessons they had shared. Years passed, and humanity embarked on a new chapter. The architects withdrew further, watching silently as humans took their first steps toward true autonomy. Mistakes were made, as they always were, but so were breakthroughs. People learned to embrace uncertainty, recognizing that growth came not from avoiding failure, but from facing it head-on. Rachel often reflected on those early days. Standing beside Alex as they gazed at the stars, she remembered the fear, the doubt, and the courage it had taken to reach out instead of striking back. "Do you think we made the right choice?" she asked one night, her voice soft. Alex smiled faintly, his eyes fixed on the horizon. "I think we made the only choice we could. We didn't have all the answers, and maybe we still don't, but we're learning, and that's what matters." Together they stood in silence, the weight of humanity's journey resting lightly on their shoulders. The road ahead was uncertain, filled with challenges and opportunities alike. But for the first time in centuries, humanity walked it freely, not alone. But alongside forces it was only beginning to understand, and somewhere, far beyond the reach of human perception, the architects observed, their forms shifting like constellations. In the endless expanse of space, they knew the risks of letting humanity chart its own course, but they also understood the potential rewards. Perhaps in time, this fragile species would rise to meet the cosmos as equals, not as gods, but as creators, explorers, and dreamers. Humanity's story was far from over. But for now, it was theirs too, right?